I knew I had officially crossed into invisible territory the day I caught Brandon Googling how to depreciate office furniture during a client meeting, and somehow I was the one who got the thank you email afterward. "Thanks, Laura. Great insights today," chirped back the client, CCing half the executive team. Brandon didn't know the difference between net income and a napkin doodle, yet I was the one holding our entire division together with Excel formulas, caffeine, and willpower. But sure, let's all pretend Brandon's $1 million smile and empty charisma were the secret sauce behind a $20 million client migration. 12 years I'd given to Northcrest Analytics. Long enough to have rituals, the 9:15 coffee that sputtered twice before filling my mug, the shared donut Fridays with Rita from audit, the keyboard clack loud enough to sound like protest. Yet somehow, I had become background noise. Necessary but unseen. Like the office Wi-Fi password taped under the router. Useful, forgettable. Then came Heather Walsh, VP of Finance, sweeping in like a scented candle explosion. Perfect bob haircut, PowerPoint pep talks, and enough buzzwords to make TED Talks sound profound. Agile mindset, revenue positive pivot, culture first reinvention. She loved the word reinvention, her code for gut the team and hand their workload to her pet hires. And Brandon, her golden boy, was the poster child of that reinvention. 29, smug, and dense enough to think QuickBooks was a coffee shop app. I trained him anyway, because that's what I did. I cleaned messes, patched gaps, ran numbers until they confessed truths no one wanted to see. Teaching Brandon felt like teaching a raccoon to file taxes. Cute in theory, tragic in execution. He'd ask, "So, what's the difference between a write-off and a write-down?" While correcting my tone in meetings. Once, I handed him a reconciliation sheet, and he asked if the numbers auto-updated themselves each morning. I told him yes, just like the coffee machine reads our dreams. Still, I smiled. Because people like Heather mistake quiet for weak. They think if you don't bark, you're declawed. But I was watching. Listening. Heather's praise for Brandon came too fast, too rehearsed. Sudden invites to investor briefings, mysterious deletions in audit logs where his errors used to live. It was like someone was scrubbing his incompetence in real time. She was shielding him, and I intended to find out why. But I didn't rush. The gift of being underestimated is time. So I played along. Let them think Laura was the dependable ghost who floated through spreadsheets and board decks, loyal or too tired to ask for more. My chance came one Wednesday at 4:03 p.m. I spotted an unlogged edit in the internal compliance portal, a small timestamp, no initials, attached to Brandon's credential file. It looked harmless, but it smelled wrong, like a rose-scented candle masking a gas leak. I screenshotted, archived, and backed up to a drive no one knew existed. I wasn't sure what the game was yet, but I knew two things. Heather was lying, and Brandon wasn't just dumb. He was dangerous in that pampered, protected way mediocrity becomes lethal. He was polished, packaged, and perched high enough to fall hard. I stayed quiet, waiting. Then came the Q2 town hall, the circus disguised as celebration. Heather strutted on stage wearing a white blazer that practically glowed with delusion. Brandon stood beside her like a Labrador who'd just learned to sit. "We're thrilled to announce some leadership changes that reflect our new direction," she said, voice sugary and sharp. "Please join me in congratulating Brandon Lowe on his promotion to Senior Director of Financial Strategy." I blinked, smiled, because if I didn't smile, I'd laugh. The room froze. Then came polite clapping, soft, hesitant. Rita from audit gave me a look that screamed, "Are you kidding me?" Brandon took the mic like a kid receiving a Nobel Prize. "Wow, I just want to thank Laura here. She taught me so much." He turned, flashing that smirk that made me want to throw a chair through a window. "She really paved the way." I smiled wider. "Congratulations," I said, loud enough for the front row. "Don't forget to file your Form 2T849 this time. You know how compliance loves surprises. A few snickers rippled through the crowd. Heather's face stiffened. I just kept smiling, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was recording. I was collecting. And I was almost ready to burn the stage they thought they owned. After the applause died and Heather resumed her victory speech, I sat quietly, fingers resting on the edge of my notebook. Everyone assumed I was taking minutes. I wasn't. I was cataloging my first set of evidence. The moment incompetence was rewarded and accountability got shoved out with the leftover bagels. When the meeting ended, while Heather was busy clinking glasses with Brandon and the interns were pretending to network, I went back to my desk and started pulling HR files like a librarian with a grudge. First, his onboarding forms. Incomplete. His CPA certificate scan was missing a signature. The issue date June, but his first official approval on company financials was stamped March. A 3-month discrepancy might not bother HR, but I'd survived 12 years of audits. I knew the smell of something cooked. Next, I checked the internal change logs. The credential file had been verified on April 3rd, but by hand, not by system sync. No initials, no notes, no system ID. Someone had quietly turned fiction into fact. I copied everything. Screenshot, duplicate, offline backup. Brandon thought I paved the way. He had no idea I was laying tripwires. Heather thought I'd sulk in silence. She had no idea I'd already started writing her obituary in metadata. By the end of the day, I wasn't furious. I was focused. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't just working. I was building leverage. 2 weeks later, the rain came like punctuation. Gray sky, dripping vents, the hum of overworked fluorescence. I was knee-deep in quarterly reconciliation when I spotted it. The line that would rewrite everything. CPA credential number 492811, issued June 29th. I froze. My eyes flicked to the March reconciliation file. Brandon's signature scrawled across page 6, dated March 14th. My stomach didn't drop. My jaw didn't tighten. I just whispered, "Got you." Because that one mismatch didn't just void a single report. It compromised every financial disclosure he'd touched before June. That's retroactive fraud. I opened the change log again. The verified status on his record wasn't an automated HR sync. It was a manual entry, time-stamped April 2nd, pushed by an admin alias I didn't recognize. Not HR, not IT. Someone with override access. Someone high. My pulse slowed instead of rising. This wasn't just scandal. It was structure. Heather had built a paper castle on false credentials and was too arrogant to check the foundation. I opened a new document titled Ethics Memo, Licensing Discrepancy. Bullet points only. Facts, dates, cross-references. No speculation, no emotion. Just breadcrumbs that would lead to the rot. I attached screenshots, change histories, report IDs, cross-links to compliance approvals, and timestamps from our internal archive. I uploaded it into the compliance portal under my still active liaison credentials, an oversight from a project 3 years back, and triggered a system timestamp. Immutable, traceable. My user ID etched forever into the record. Then I downloaded 3 encrypted copies, cloud, USB, offline. Not because I was paranoid, because I was professional. I leaned back, looked across the open-plan maze of desks. Brandon was laughing near Heather's office, clutching a latte like a trophy. They had no clue a grenade was now ticking in the server. The next morning, Heather sent a Slack ping. "Hey, Laura, coffee later? Just a quick chat." The emoji smiley face she used felt like a pink glitter-coated dagger. I knew that tone. It wasn't coffee. It was my burial. Still, I went. That's what professionals do. We show up to our own executions looking composed. Heather was already in the cafe room, pretending to sip cappuccino foam. Beside her sat Melanie from HR, clipboard ready, eyes distant like she'd practiced dissociating. "Laura," Heather purred, "thank you for meeting. You've done so much for the company." I nodded. "Here we go." "The landscape's shifting," she continued, like she was narrating a TED Talk. "We're realigning to be more agile." There it was, her favorite euphemism for firing people. "Some roles are being sunset." She slid a cream envelope across the table. I opened it. Transition package, benefits through the quarter, 3 months salary. No NDA, no non-compete, no gag clause. My eyebrows almost lifted. Either legal was asleep, or Heather thought I'd thank her for the gentle shove off a cliff. I didn't rage. I didn't argue. I smiled, signed, and said, "Thank you for the opportunity." Because the moment I saw that missing NDA, I knew this wasn't a termination. This was an invitation. And she had no idea she'd just left the castle gate wide open. When I left that room, the sky outside was the color of wet steel, and the coffee I'd bought just to look busy had gone cold in my hand. Heather thought she'd buried me under corporate empathy and cappuccino foam, but she had just signed her own release form. I walked back to my cubicle, closed the door quietly behind me, and looked around one last time. The same spreadsheets, the same hum of air vents, the same people pretending productivity was safety. But now, the entire building sat on top of my landmine, and all I had to do was wait for someone to step on it. The next morning, the office smelled like stale pastries and self-congratulation. They were celebrating the realignment. I wasn't supposed to be there, but my badge still worked because, in a company that preaches transformation, no one ever audits access control. The irony made me smile. I slipped in through the side entrance, holding a thin vanilla envelope. Inside was a single printed copy of my ethics memo, signed, time-stamped, and indexed in the compliance archive. I walked straight toward the glass conference room where the leadership team had gathered for their morning toast. Heather stood near the head of the table, champagne flute in hand, radiant in her own delusion. "New leadership, new energy, new direction," she chirped, her tone like a motivational speaker trapped in a sales pitch. Brandon hovered beside her, beaming like a man who believed his own LinkedIn bio. "We're proud to introduce the future of Northcrest Analytics," Heather continued, raising her glass. Applause followed, thin, dutiful, hollow. I waited until the clapping faded, then stepped inside the room without a word. The chatter dropped instantly. I didn't make eye contact with anyone. I just walked around the table to where CFO Michael Trent sat, shoulders stiff, eyes half-lidded with disinterest. He'd always been the kind of man who cared more about numbers than people, a trait I could respect. Today, more than ever. Without a word, I placed the envelope by his right hand. He looked up, confused. I said nothing, just nodded once. Then I stepped back, leaned against the wall, and folded my arms. Heather blinked, startled. Brandon tried to smile, but looked more like a kid caught with a slingshot in church. Michael opened the envelope, pulled out the single page, and read silently. Then again. His expression didn't change, but his jaw did. A faint flex, like he'd just bit down on something sour. "What's today's date?" he asked suddenly, voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the room. Heather froze mid-sentence, champagne glass hovering. "October 1st, she replied, her tone light, uncertain. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Michael rose from his chair slowly, like gravity had thickened. "Excuse me?" he said quietly. "I need to speak with legal." He didn't look at Heather. He didn't look at Brandon. He just left the room, the memo in his hand. No one moved. The room stayed suspended in that uneasy corporate stillness where everyone pretends not to smell smoke. I didn't speak either. I didn't have to. My message was already screaming in 10-point font. 27 minutes passed before Michael returned. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him walked Claire from Legal and Naveen, our compliance director. Both looked pale, serious, and far too awake for mid-morning. Michael placed the folder back on the table. "Can someone confirm the date?" he said again. "October 1st, Naveen murmured. Michael nodded. The memo was filed April 14th. Officially time-stamped and archived. It predates the Q2 investor certification. Heather's smile faltered, then vanished entirely. Claire was already opening her laptop, fingers moving fast. That can't be right," Heather stammered. "It is," Naveen said evenly. "The timestamp is clean. No edits, no delayed syncs. It's been in the system for 6 months. You could feel the oxygen leaving the room. Filing an ethics memo before a financial certification wasn't just awkward timing. It was a legal crater. It meant Northcrest's previous filings were materially inaccurate. It meant potential SEC violations. And it meant the CFO had a documented, dated warning that the board had ignored. Brandon's color drained. "Wait, are you saying I did something illegal?" he whispered, looking around. I finally spoke. "No, Brandon. She let you." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was recognition. The kind that ripples through power like a fracture line. Heather's eyes flicked toward Michael, but he was already typing, his expression unreadable. She knew. I knew. Everyone in that room knew. The grenade had gone off. The air in the boardroom turned heavy, like the room itself had realized it was hosting a crime scene. No one spoke. No one dared to even breathe too loudly. Heather just sat there, a mannequin in a $1,000 blazer, staring at the CFO as if she could will this moment to reverse itself. Brandon leaned back in his chair, cheeks pale, trying to look casual and failing spectacularly. Michael, the CFO, didn't shout. He didn't even look angry. That's how you knew it was bad. He was quiet, measured, the kind of calm that only comes when someone's mentally counting lawsuits. "Effective immediately," he said at last. "Freeze all Q3 sign-offs. No new certifications, no outgoing investor documents, no press communications." His tone was clinical, deliberate. Heather's mouth opened like she wanted to protest, but the words never formed. Claire from Legal was already cross-checking something on her screen, typing with the precision of a surgeon. "If that memo predates certification," Claire murmured, "we're looking at potential breach of fiduciary duty and disclosure violations. SEC exposure, possibly even retroactive audit retractions." Naveen, our compliance director, nodded grimly. Heather tried to rally. "Let's not overreact. We can fix this," she insisted, her voice trembling just enough for everyone to hear the crack. Claire didn't even glance up. "Fix what? A 6-month-old ethics memo you ignored?" Heather's breath hitched. "I wasn't aware of any memo," she said quickly. Too quickly. Michael turned to her. "You were CC'd," Claire said flatly, rotating her laptop so the email thread filled the screen. There it was. April 14th, 2:47 p.m. Sent to Heather Walsh and Brandon Lowe. Subject line, credential discrepancy. Ethics filing. Brandon's lips parted, uselessly. "It must have gone to spam," he muttered. Nobody laughed. Heather blinked like someone had thrown water in her face. Michael exhaled slowly. "We'll need to notify audit and the board by end of day," he said. "And Heather, Consider yourself on administrative leave until we complete the internal investigation. The words landed like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Heather's chin lifted slightly, but her eyes were glassy. Michael, please, we can... Don't. He cut in. Not here. Then he gathered the folder, stood, and walked out. Claire followed. Naveen lingered a moment, giving me a look. Not of pity, not of sympathy, but of acknowledgement. Then he left too. The door closed softly behind them. Silence. Pure, thick silence. The kind that tastes like endings. No one moved for a long time. Then, without looking at anyone, I turned and walked out. No dramatic speech, no victory pose, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth didn't need volume. It had timestamps. Back at my desk, I began packing. One drawer, a few mechanical pencils, an old charger, my coffee mug with the fading Audit Whisperer logo. 12 years of my life, reduced to a small box and a flicker of satisfaction. My badge still worked. I could have logged out and left right then, but instead, I did one last thing. I opened the system admin panel, another oversight Heather's team had never corrected, and navigated to my own user account. Status: active. I clicked deactivate. Watched the gray loading bar slide across the screen and end with a single word: inactive. It was poetic, signing my own release. No HR escort, no last-minute pep talk, no we'll keep in touch. Just quiet, chosen departure. Upstairs, movement echoed. Doors opening, voices hushed. HR arrived. Not one of the interns this time. Bonnie, the senior officer with the laminated folders and the soft, lethal calm of someone who'd done this before. She walked straight past me and into the conference room. 10 minutes later, she re-emerged with Heather trailing behind her. Heather's face was unreadable. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just followed Bonnie down the hall and disappeared behind the frosted glass doors of HR. No one asked where she was going. Everyone already knew. As I carried my box toward the elevator, the office buzzed quietly. Slack notifications pinging, whispers rising, someone already updating their LinkedIn headline. When the elevator doors opened, I caught my reflection in the chrome panel. I didn't look victorious. I looked calm. Done. The kind of calm you only get after surviving a storm you built yourself. 12 years, I thought, and all it took was one document to remind them what silence can do. By the time I stepped outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried that post-storm heaviness, the kind that makes everything sound slower, heavier, more deliberate. I stood there for a moment with my box in my arms, staring at the Northcrest building. All that glass, all that polish, and underneath it, rot. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel relieved. Just done. 12 years of keeping everyone else's chaos in line, of fixing mistakes no one would admit making. And all it took to tip the balance was one truth, filed neatly in an archive. I set the box in my trunk, got into my car, and drove home in silence. No radio, no playlist, no reflection soundtrack. Just the hum of the tires against wet asphalt and the steady beat of my heart. Finally, my own. That night, I sat on the porch with a mug of chamomile tea that had gone lukewarm before I even took a sip. My email pinged, automated out-of-office replies, frantic requests for files, a dozen subject lines starting with urgent. One of them was from Brandon. No punctuation, just a string of panicked words and a crying emoji. I let it sit there. The next ping was different. A phone call. Unknown number, Manhattan area code. I hesitated, then answered. "Laura," said a low voice I recognized instantly. "It's Ben Kramer. The founding partner, the man whose name still hung in brass letters in the lobby. You only heard from Ben when something was on fire. Good evening, I said, keeping my tone even. Off the record, he started, and I almost smiled. They always led with that line. Would you, hypothetically, be open to consulting with us? Short term, advisory capacity. I waited a beat. Not while Heather still has an office, I said plainly. Silence stretched long enough for me to hear him thinking. Understood, he said finally. That's clear. The call ended. I placed my phone face down on the table and exhaled. The night was cool, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I thought that was it, that I could close the book. But 2 hours later, an email arrived. No greeting, no fluff. Just a PDF attachment labeled Revised Engagement Terms, L. Hartman. I opened it slowly. Base rate generous. Scope, regulatory oversight and investor compliance review. Reporting line, direct to audit committee. That phrase alone made my pulse tick faster. It meant no Heather, no Brandon, no middle management with shiny teeth and empty skulls. Halfway down the page, I found it. No non-disclosure agreement required. I read that line 3 times. They weren't just asking me back. They were giving me freedom, voice, leverage, and the authority to act without filters. It wasn't a bribe. It was a white flag. They knew I didn't want noise or revenge speeches or social media redemption arcs. I wanted precision, accountability. The next morning, I didn't rush to reply. I let them wait, because for once, the timing was mine to control. At 8 a.m. sharp, a calendar invite hit my inbox. Emergency board meeting, mandatory attendance. By 8:10, I was logged into the Zoom call. Black suits, tight jaws, caffeine-stained eyes, all the familiar faces that used to look past me like I was wallpaper. CFO Michael was leading. He didn't bother with greetings. His screen shared immediately, displaying a single document titled Q3 Investor Certification, Revised Filing Addendum. His voice was calm, resigned. This revised disclosure includes documentation filed internally on April 14th, he said. Verification completed last week. Our prior certification was materially inaccurate. Effective immediately. We're refiling under legal and audit guidance. No one blinked. He continued. Personnel updates. Heather Walsh has been placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. Brandon Lowe is under internal review and is no longer authorized to approve financial reports. The silence that followed felt like a prayer. Then he added, Laura Hartman has been appointed as an external compliance consultant reporting directly to this board. My camera stayed off, but I could feel their eyes shift, recalibrating. Ben gave a small nod, a recognition, a truce. The meeting ended 11 minutes later. No closing remarks, no empty promises, just the sound of power rearranging itself in real time. At 9:00 a.m., the board meeting dissolved like smoke, each executive logging off without eye contact or small talk, leaving behind the ghost of tension that clung to the screen even after the last camera blinked dark. I sat for a moment staring at my reflection in the black monitor, a faint smirk tracing across my lips. Not satisfaction, recognition. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one chasing acknowledgement. They were. At 9:07, I closed my laptop, slipped into a charcoal blazer, and drove back to Northcrest's headquarters, not out of obligation, but curiosity. I wanted to see the aftermath. The parking lot was half empty, but the front lobby buzzed with whispers and the metallic click of anxious heels. When I walked past reception, no one stopped me. My ID badge, somehow still active, gave its polite little beep at the scanner. as if the system itself understood I'd earned the right to come home on my terms. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of disinfectant and tension. Paperwork rustled. Phones rang without answers. I moved down the hall toward the glass boardroom, the same room where Heather had toasted the future just days ago. Now the blinds were half drawn, the lights dim, chairs scattered like debris from a minor explosion. And there she was, Heather Walsh, alone, standing by the window with her back to me, still wearing the white blazer she'd once used as armor. Her reflection in the glass looked paler than her real face, almost ghostly. She turned slightly when she sensed movement, but not fully. Just enough for her eyes to meet mine in the reflection. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, filled with all the words she'd once thrown around like currency. Realignment, growth, trust. Now they meant nothing. I took a slow step forward. She didn't move. The silence between us wasn't hostile. It was verdict. Her gaze dropped to the table, where a single envelope sat beside an untouched cup of coffee. HR's handiwork, the final signature that would end her reign. I stopped by the door, resting a hand against the cool glass. "Heather?" I said evenly. Her shoulders tensed. "Laura," she murmured, her voice brittle. "You should know I never meant—" I cut her off gently. "It doesn't matter anymore. I wasn't there for apologies. I wasn't there for explanations. I was there because every story deserves an ending, and I wanted to see mine in person." She turned to face me fully then, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, pride clinging to her like cheap perfume. "You think this fixes anything?" she asked softly. I almost smiled. "No," I said. "It just exposes what was already broken." For a second, her expression cracked. Just a flicker of the fear she'd spent her career disguising behind presentation slides and rehearsed charm. Then she nodded once, a silent concession, and looked away. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. Some victories are meant to be quiet. When I stepped outside, the morning light broke through the clouds, reflecting off the wet pavement like polished steel. The air smelled cleaner. I walked across the parking lot slowly, my heels clicking a rhythm that didn't belong to the old Laura, the one who stayed late fixing other people's mistakes, who waited for recognition that never came. At my car, I paused. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. 2 words. "Thank you." And beneath it, "You saved us." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, "No, I just didn't let you bury me." I hit send, tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. No music, no backward glance, just motion. Steady, deliberate, free. As the building shrank in the rearview mirror, I realized something simple. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums quietly in the background, wearing a timestamp, a signature, and the calm certainty of someone who knows she was right all along. The road ahead shimmered in sunlight, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt inevitable.